My son was in surgery when mom called. We need you at your sister's engagement party. I can't. He's in the operating room. She said, you're choosing him over family. I hung up. 3 hours later, my son woke up and asked why grandma wasn't there. I was sitting in a plastic chair outside the surgical unit when my phone lit up and I saw mom's name. And for 1 second, I actually thought she was calling to ask about Noah because he had been in that hospital for 2 days already and I had not slept more than an hour at a stretch. And I answered it and she said, how is he? And I said, still in surgery. And there was this pause. And then she said, listen, your sister really needs you at the party tonight. And I pulled the phone away from my face and looked at it for a moment before I put it back and said, Mom, Noah is in the operating room right now. And she said, I know, but you've been there all day and there's nothing you can actually do sitting in that waiting room. And I want you to understand that she said that. She genuinely said that. There's nothing you can do. Like being there was optional. Like the chair I was sitting in didn't matter. Growing up, my sister Claire was the one everything got rearranged for. Her recitals, her graduations, her dramas, her boyfriends, her breakups. The house shifted its entire atmosphere around whatever Claire was going through at any given moment. And I learned early that my stuff was background noise. And I had made my peace with that a long time ago. But this was different. This was my 9-year-old son and his appendix had perforated and he had been in that building for 48 hours and I had not left once. I said, Mom, I'm not coming. And her voice changed immediately and she said, your sister will never forget this. And I said, I won't either. And she said, you're being selfish. And something in me went very quiet and very clear. And I said, I'm gonna hang up now. And I did. And then I blocked her number and then I blocked my dad's. And then I sat back down in that plastic chair and stared at the doors. Claire's engagement pictures went up online that evening. Everyone smiling. Dad's arm around Claire. Long table covered in flowers. Not one message about Noah. Not one. 3 hours after I hung up on my mom, those doors opened and a nurse came out and told me he was stable and I could come in. And I walked into that room and Noah was pale and small and there were tubes and he looked at me and the first thing he said, was, Dad, did grandma come? And I sat down next to his bed and took his hand and said, no, buddy, she couldn't make it. And he nodded like he was processing that. And then he said, that's okay, you were here. And I looked at the ceiling for a second. 6 weeks later, he was home and doing fine. And the family started calling through relatives. An aunt first, then my cousin, then Claire herself. All of it the same script. Mom was stressed. Mom didn't mean it. Mom cries every night. Nobody mentioning Noah. Everyone managing mom's feelings about the situation she created. Then a cousin let something slip about my parents updating their will, and I understood the phone call slightly differently after that. Though honestly, it didn't change anything because my wife and I had spent years building something quietly. Rental income, savings, investments. Nothing my parents knew about because we never talked about money with them. And the threat of inheritance had about as much grip on me as a wet piece of paper. A letter arrived from my dad 3 months later, handwritten. 3 paragraphs about respect and family loyalty and how disappointed they were. I read it once, put it on the counter, and made Noah's packed lunch. He was back at school by then, getting on fine. Still asks occasionally why we don't see grandma anymore, and I tell him we'll talk about it when he's older, and he accepts that and goes back to whatever he's doing because he is 9 and his life is full and he does not need to carry any of this. My mom texted from a number I didn't recognize last month. It just said, I miss my grandson. I looked at it for a long time. Noah was in the next room doing homework, pencil tapping against his desk the way it always does when he's thinking. I put my phone face down on the table. He called out, Dad, can you help with this? And I got up and went in and sat next to him and we worked through it together, and by the time we were done, I had forgotten to go back and reply. That's probably my answer.